Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
I think this is a misconception that Indian enterprises or Indian customers are not willing to pay. Actually, some of our investors, even past and now, actually get surprised that MoveInSync is such a large enterprises and it's got so many well-paying Indian customers. India is a price-sensitive market, but as long as you are giving some genuine value to the customer, which comes back to the point that are you going ahead and solving a right problem at the right market, even Indian customers will be willing to pay. Morning everyone, I'm Deepesh, the co-founder of MoveInSync, world's largest office commute platform. We provide a tech platform to ferry 25% of the country's workforce to make sure that their journey is safe, secure and cost efficient, especially for enterprises. So assume as a co-founder, you and your colleagues are working to create a market for chairs which have 5 legs. Now that directly is not going to fit the market. So I think theoretically going after a large market and putting the right product is the product market fit. It's very important, otherwise you and your team will unnecessarily put the energy to make this chair which eventually will not have a market. So I'll break this question into multiple parts. Let me take the first part, which is identifying a large problem. Now I think that's fairly tricky. What helps is your background necessarily helps. So I came with a little bit of an experience for the transportation department, and being on the roads of Bangalore and Hyderabad, I saw that over the years the traffic is increasing. So as a company we wanted to focus on something which solves the ride sharing or the transportation of the employee problem. Now during the course of this journey, it's very important that as an entrepreneur and co-founder, you should be married to the problem, but not to the solution which you've chosen. You should be very, very open to listening to comments and feedback. So the second part of the product market fit is very carefully listening to your early customers. Let's take an example. We identified that the cars are increasing and hence some kind of pooling or ride sharing is required. So what we went ahead as our earliest product was that we will provide a carpool platform. We went ahead to the airport which had opened up in Hyderabad at Shamshabad in 2009, but we figured out that while pooling was required, we were not getting enough customers. We actually thought that maybe for pooling you require a lot of security and maybe the Indian infrastructure or the security factor or the trust factor is not high. So we actually went ahead and did this experiment outside of India in Singapore. So we provided this carpool platform in Singapore, but the fundamentals of the solution did not change. So while the problem of pooling had to be solved, but probably the way we were trying to solve was not the best way. So guys, this is probably the most important part of our discussion today, pivoting. If you remember in the first part when I said that you figured out a large market, it is important to stick to the problem, not to the solution. And that is what we're going to talk about it right now. Now, as MoveInSync, we tried solving this office transportation, carpooling problem in a way which we told you, right? Going to the customers, convincing them to go to the airport, trying it outside of India. But at some point while we were talking to all these customers, we figured out that the solution is not working at all. That didn't mean that the problem was wrong or the market was wrong. We went ahead and I think we kept knocking one door after the other. Just a chance, we knocked upon a door at a large tech company in Hyderabad, and when we told them that we have this carpool platform, they said, I actually don't care about your carpool platform, but I do have a office commute platform. And I think that was the key, that we kept our eyes and ears open. So the company said that I do want to get a lot of people to my office. We have around 200 cars, we ferry around 1,000 employees. Can you do it better for me? Now I think that is when we figured out that probably that's the solution approach we should look at. So as entrepreneurs, we worked at whatever was given to us. There wasn't a commitment, but the company was good enough to give us the data on a no-name basis with removing the personal identifiable information. We worked on the data and we figured out that probably we can drive some cost efficiency and better employee satisfaction to this company. But that does not mean that you've got one prospect and you're going to close on it. Now we figured out that probably our approach to the problem which we were trying to solve in pooling, this was probably a better approach. So instead of going directly to the customers, theoretically B2C, now we pivoted, or we were thinking of going to a B2B approach. So we worked with this company, we were lucky enough to get some data from them, but we didn't convert them. And I think that's also a very important thing for a B2B sell. Just because a customer has told you that they are interested does not mean that they will necessarily buy. But what we got from this data point is that we got a lot of interest from senior stakeholders in multiple companies. The CEO of one of the large BPOs called us to the table with the fact that we actually we just had some kind of a very basic infrastructure or a prototype in place. We didn't have an end solution in place. But I think as we kept on knocking more and more doors, one of the prospect which later became our first customer, Google, called us. We showed them in some initial meeting that yes, we had a platform which could do some optimization, but I think it took us a very long time to actually convince them and get to this point. So I think, guys, what's very, very important is that while you are married to the problem, and as long as you're feeling that the problem is large enough, be very, very open to pivoting. And it's not only MoveInSync which has done pivot at some point in time. If you see, Ola actually started as a out-of-station rental platform, which is probably one of the largest cab-hailing companies now. Myntra, which was a company bought by Flipkart, a large e-commerce player, actually started in a B2B domain by selling customized materials. So I think some of these, and including MoveInSync, the founders understand that the problem is large, but maybe it needs to be solved differently. So that is very important, that you need to keep your eyes and ears open. So guys, when we were talking about pivoting and being open, I think it's very, very important. 2 points are very, very important. First, what one of our investors called it as YAFO, yet another fucking opportunity. As an entrepreneur, you have to be very focused. So as MoveInSync, when we decided that we're going to be only in the space of pooling, ride sharing and office commute, a lot of early enterprises or early customers told us that while this solution of pooling is great, can you also give us this hotel booking, airline booking and all these other tools? Now I think you shouldn't get greedy about it because there are going to be many opportunities knocking your door, but you should remain true to your core. So as a core, office commute was a core to us, and that is what we kept our focus on. So that's very, very important for an entrepreneur, focus. The second part of it is we decided on the tech side, and this is back in 2010-11, that we're going to only offer our solution as SaaS and on the cloud. Now, we're selling to these large enterprises, and one of them was a big bank, a multinational bank. Now, they were not very open to giving us the data. So they said, we don't want we're happy to see what you've got, but we don't want it as cloud, we want it as an on-premises solution. So as a team, I and my co-founder, we had decided at some point in time that we will only be able to offer value to the customer only if it is SaaS, because that is when we will be able to quickly roll out those updates to the customer and not waste our energy in doing maintenance, etc. So I think what we went back to this financial customer. We told them that we understand your concerns for data privacy. You are a bank, we respect that. But why don't you put us in front of your InfoSec department? And we said that if we fail it, not only we'll give you on-premises, we'll give you on-premises free for life. So I think that's what you have to put a stake on the ground, and you have to be very true for a reason which you stand for. So this company put us in touch with this InfoSec department, and it was not that actually all our tech was flawless or all of it passed all the conditions which we had claimed for. I think the InfoSec head, this lady, saw this passion as a co-founder, and they said that, if these guys are ready to put so much in it, why don't we help them get over this InfoSec thing? So I think it took us a long 8 to 10 months period to clear this InfoSec for this financial, but I think as long as we were clear on why we were doing SaaS, why we were on cloud, I think a large enterprise like this was also willing to listen to you and stick to it. So I think that's very, very important. What you should pivot and what you should not. What's core to your business? Let's say the problem you are solving is very core, and some of those choices you've made and why you've made. I think that's very important. So guys, in the journey of product market fit, we've talked about three things. We've talked about we should go after a large market. We should try to see how the product fits that market. Third, we should be open to pivoting if it requires, but still stick to our core and some of the fundamental values which we've decided. Now, fourth is working at a minimum viable product. Now, as techies, sometimes we get a little overhung upon that we will solve the entire problem and only then we're going to get it to the customers. Now, that's a myth. What you should do is you should closely work with the customer. Now, let me give you an example. When we went to our first customer, which was Google, we actually had a solution which was a route optimization solution, which they probably didn't require on day one. They actually required some kind of a transparency. Obviously, we thought of various things and we decided that we're going to put a tech in Android and we're going to look at what the drivers are doing. Now, we didn't go back and say that, oh, guys, we're going to come to you after 2 months when we've got some tech for it. Actually, we turned around quickly something in a week's time, which actually did not meet 100% of the use cases, but it actually met 80% of the use cases. We gave this to 5 drivers, and it was very important that you choose your first customer more as a partner. So we told them, give us your 5 drivers which are very open to tech, which are almost like your employees, who are going to listen and not going to crib about the failures. So I think all we did was we spent days and nights at the customer's premises, working with those drivers, working with those transport managers, and working it iteratively. It wasn't that we did it in day one. And actually, to put these stats, in the first year, we actually just signed 1 customer and we kept working with this 1 customer. In the second year, we actually just signed 1 more customer. It was only from the third year that we kept signing more customers. So you had to be patient enough. If you are doing a problem which is complex, you have to give it time. Even though your friends might be telling, even though your investors might be telling, but you need to figure out if the problem is well solved. If not, then you will just become an example of a company which came and could not solve the problem. The most important part to give yourself a confidence that as an enterprise you've got the product market fit is if your present early customers are willing to give recommendations. And when I mean recommendations, it's not just attending a phone call from a prospect. Some of our earlier customers were actually willing to host clients, take them through the entire premises, spend a few hours and actually put energy to make sure that MoveInSync gets the next customers. So they actually felt that those customers actually felt that they were the builders of that company, they were the builders of the product. Now obviously that did not happen on day one. As we mentioned, in the first 2 years, we just had 2 customers. But both these customers were willing to go to that extra mile to co-host those prospects, spend time, write recommendations for us. Now I think that is why in the third year, when we started getting a lot of inbound queries on why they want to use MoveInSync, I think that was a very good indicator that we've reached a product market fit. Now pricing plays a very important role for you to conclude that you've got a product marketing fit. I think this is a misconception that Indian enterprises or Indian customers are not willing to pay. Actually, some of our investors, even past and now, actually get surprised that MoveInSync is such a large enterprises and it's got so many well-paying Indian customers. India is a price-sensitive market, but as long as you are giving some genuine value to the customer, which comes back to the point that are you going ahead and solving a right problem at the right market, even Indian customers will be willing to pay. In a B2B enterprise, what do you expect? Do you expect that if you give something like 100 rupees cheap, a company like a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon will buy you? Probably that's not the cost of even the teacups which they use. So I think as long as you are able to indicate to them the value you are bringing, they will be willing to pay. Now the second part of it is, which is very, very important, is that you should figure out what is your pricing model. What it means is that if you're selling bananas, you should figure out कि वो दर्जन के भाव बेच रहे हो या किलो के भाव बेच रहे हो. So that is very important. Now let me give you an example. When we sold the solution to our first customer, we actually went ahead and for the simplicity reasons, we priced it on the number of cabs you use, we will charge a certain rupee. Let's assume it was 100 rupee. So if you're running 200 cabs, 200 into 100 is what we are charging you. Now let us see what is the value we are bringing to you. Now if a MoveInSync tech does a good job, actually you will require lesser cabs than what you were requiring in past, which means that as I keep doing a good job, my revenues will keep diminishing. So I think that is very, very important, which we figured out, and actually we went ahead to this customer and we said that we will stop charging you on a per cab basis, but actually move to a matrix which we cannot influence, which is the number of employees the company has. So we pivoted, or actually we changed and brought this new model in this industry, which is now a benchmark, obviously, because 8 years back we went ahead and introduced by pricing our software on a per employee basis instead of a per cab basis, because that is where I could justify that if I keep working hard for you, my revenues will actually increase instead of decrease. So I think these two are the very important things. First, the myth that the Indian customers are not willing to pay. They are actually willing to pay as long as you give them value. And second, figuring it out कि केले को दर्जन के हिसाब से बेचना है या किलो के हिसाब से बेचना है. Now you will find the obvious answer to the key matrix of a B2B SaaS companies on Google. There is enough and more literature. So what happens after day 365, which is tracking your ARR, annual recurring revenue, cost of acquisitions, contribution margins, the velocity of ARR growth, you can all look up on the internet and that's all there. I'm going to share something which I did not find it on the internet but still found it very useful. What you should track when you are from day 0 to day 365. Now, some of these things look obvious to you, right? As a office commute platform, we were obviously looking at tracking of how many employees in the company were trying to use our tool in the app or on the website to make their bookings. But actually, we were going ahead after the wrong metrics. We figured out that if you are an enterprise and you've bought a MoveInSync solution, and as an employee, you have no other choice to come to the office by using a MoveInSync platform to book your ride or to track it. So that's boxed, which means that you have no other option, you will adopt it. The enterprise will force you to adopt it. But what we figured out that the other side of the table, which is actually the driver, which is not a direct customer, the adoption of the driver was very, very important. Because if the driver does not adopt it, which means that the employees will not be able to track their cabs, which means that the CEO or the CFO, whoever signed the check, is going to be unhappy. If the employees don't use the tech, it means that one of their goals, which in our case was transparency of billing, will not get met, which is why again the stakeholder or the buyer will be unhappy. So contrary to the immediate thought that you should look at the adoption of an employee, actually we went ahead and look at the adoption of the stakeholder. And it's not as simple that you just look at the adoption. The person is going to adopt only if you solve a pain point for the guy. Now if you think what we were doing in tech was that we were putting this to make sure that it was benefiting this enterprise. But I think transport was this old industry which was always run on pen and paper, and this is 2010-11, this is the pre-Ola Uber days in the country. So tech was not very natural to this driver. So the driver would actually be a little anxious, little cautious about what are these companies trying to do. Are they trying to reduce my income by doing this? And that was probably the thought on this guy's head. So I think we very, very closely worked to find out what is in it for the driver. And I'll give you two examples of what we did to make sure that happens. First, because it was an unorganized industry, the driver would get the customer would pay the cab supplier in turn will pay the driver, and the driver will get the money, let's say after 90 days of delivering the service. He is a poor guy, the sooner the cash comes to his pocket, he is going to be happier. So we made sure we gave him the comfort that if you are recording your data on the MoveInSync device, basically you will get exactly paid on the time as given by the enterprise. So the cash cycle for the driver reduced from 90 days to probably 40 days. And that was a win for the driver. The second thing which we did was actually in the whole pecking order, let's assume if a driver comes late to the office, the transport team of the company will always scold the driver and will take him to the task and would never listen to the driver, even though the fault might be the driver's or by the employee. Now, giving this solution actually gave him self-respect and pride. Now, one of the drivers actually vouched for us in one of our prospects saying that, सर मैं जब ये यूज करता हूं ना तो मैं अपना सर ऊपर करके चलता हूं, क्योंकि अगर कुछ प्रॉब्लम होती है तो इसके सॉफ्टवेयर में पता चल जाता है कि मेरी गलती है या एम्प्लॉय की गलती है. नाउ दैट सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट was a great thing to the driver. That was not money, that wasn't anything else. That was the self-respect which MoveInSync was putting him at par with this MNC and with this corporate employee. So I think this was the important matrix which we tracked, which was the adoption by the drivers, which was an important point for us. Now obviously for your business, you need to figure out, it might not be as direct as what you think, but you think what is pivotal. Now this is a cliche that you should look at your first customer as a partner, but I can't stress more, because if you are a growing enterprise and the customer is not willing to walk that extra mile, be open to the faults you've done, actually is not going to reach anywhere. Let me give you an example. We were doing this for our first customer, which was Google, a big tech company. Actually the first day when we rolled out the product, it was a big screw up. We actually had probably 80% of the employees reached to the office late. Now I think as a customer they could have just shown us the door, because it would have cost a job to a few of those guys who decided to buy MoveInSync. But what they instead did is they felt that everybody screws us with technology. Even Google, they themselves kind of make mistakes with tech. So they were so forgiving, which was the reason we took so much of time and worked closely with them. And now assume we had a customer who was not willing to work with us on this, we would have surely failed on day one. And I think we keep this to the very core of the company. It's even to this date when we launched out new products which we are launching every year, we make sure we tell the product team that they specifically find out somebody as a partner, even if they take a long time, but find out a client who is willing to work with you through all those failures to finally succeed that one day. So I think the most important thing is you shouldn't think of yourself as the ideal customer profile. Just because you think this is your problem, everybody else will exactly think it is their problem and will solve it like the way you're solving it. What's very important is that you go and sit next to the customer. One example is that we were trying to do this routing engine which was built on the Google Maps. We were techies, so using maps was a very comfortable way of solving problems. But when we actually sat next to this routing team which had people with basic degree, they were using all Excel for ages. And if we had to change this interface, which was this Microsoft Excel, to the map, they were finding it very uncomfortable, not in the usage, but actually the time they were spending to solve the problem also increased. So just because we felt that map is the way, map is the future, but if it is not solving their problem, it's not solving their problem. So I think that's very important, to spend some time with the customer and not just put your persona on that customer and exactly solve the way you would like to solve. I think once we got a very firm interest from our first customers, from then we gave ourselves 24 months to figure out that we have more than one customer, customers ready to reference us, take us to other customers, and all those subjective things to make sure we sign more customers, and we went to a hockey stick. The other thing I think for the entrepreneurs to look at it is pure numbers. Now obviously because we come from an industry which is an enterprise SaaS, a high ticket size, less number of customers, a lot of SaaS is actually SMB segments, but I think some of the numbers to look at probably at the end of 12 months would be 10 to 15 lakhs annual recurring revenue, and probably at the end of 24 months crossing a 30 lakhs annual recurring revenue. Now obviously depending upon what is the paying size of a customer, I think that's very, very important. And I think once you have touched to, let's say, a 50 lakhs annual recurring revenue, which in the USD terms is $1 million, I think that's when exactly you should see the hockey stick coming in action. So I think if one thing you have to follow on, it's execution. Execution is the key. For building an enterprise company, it'll take you 10 years to become an overnight success. So just keep at it, you're going to be successful one day. Sort of multiple things which we do as an entrepreneur, talking to your partner, spending time with your co-founder, discussing about problems. I think there was one thing which really helped me. Whenever I was in this tough time, I would see this movie which I really liked. That was The Pursuit of Happiness. That would keep me going, that would take me that how people faced hardship and came real out of it. So I think that's something which is very close to my heart.